Have you ever tried to force yourself to fall asleep? You lie there, eyes squeezed shut, commanding your mind to surrender to unconsciousness. Be asleep. Be asleep now. And what happens? Your mind becomes more alert. Your body tenses. Sleep, that gentle visitor, retreats further into the night. Or perhaps you've been told to just relax during a moment of anxiety. Relax, be calm, stop worrying. And immediately you feel your shoulders tighten, your jaw clench. The very act of trying to relax creates more tension. This is what I call the backwards law, though it goes by many names. The Chinese knew it as Wu Wei. Alan Watts spoke of it as the wisdom of insecurity. Viktor Frankl called it paradoxical intention. But whatever name we give it, the truth remains the same. The harder we chase certain things in life, the faster they run from us. I'm Adrian Vale. I've spent 58 years on this earth, 30 of them wandering through its philosophies and landscapes, searching for wisdom in both ancient texts and lived experience. And if there's one lesson that has revealed itself to me again and again, in 100 different forms, across a dozen different cultures, it's this: life has a peculiar sense of humor about human effort. We live in a world obsessed with striving, self-improvement, optimization, hustle culture, 5 steps to happiness, 10 habits of successful people. We're told that anything we want can be ours if we just want it badly enough, if we just work hard enough, if we just push through with sufficient determination. And for many things, this is true. You want to learn a language? Study consistently. You want to build a house? Lay one brick at a time. You want to master an instrument? Practice daily. Effort yields results. But there's a category of human experience that operates by entirely different rules. A realm where effort becomes counterproductive, where trying harder guarantees failure, where the very act of grasping pushes away what we seek. Happiness, peace, confidence, love, authenticity, sleep, spontaneity. These things share a peculiar quality. They cannot be seized. They can only be allowed. This isn't mysticism. This isn't some vague spiritual platitude. This is observable, repeatable, practical wisdom about how certain aspects of human psychology actually function. And understanding it can fundamentally change how you move through the world. Let me tell you about a man I met in Kyoto 15 years ago. His name was Takeshi, and he ran a small tea house near the Philosopher's Path. He'd been a businessman in Tokyo, successful by every conventional measure: money, status, respect. But he was miserable. So he did what many miserable people do. He pursued happiness. He read every self-help book, attended seminars, practiced gratitude journals and positive affirmations. He tried meditation, but spent the entire time thinking about whether he was doing it right, whether he was becoming more peaceful yet. The more he chased happiness, the more anxious he became about not being happy enough. His pursuit of peace created constant agitation. He was like a man trying to smooth water by slapping it. Then one day, exhausted and defeated, he simply stopped. Not because he'd achieved anything, but because he'd run out of energy to keep trying. He moved to Kyoto, opened his tea house, and decided to just live, make tea, sweep the floor, watch the seasons change. And that's when it happened. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gradually he realized he'd become what he'd been chasing. Not because he'd captured it, but because he'd stopped running. This is the mechanics of the backwards law. When we desperately want something in this category of experience, Our very desperation creates a psychological state that makes that thing impossible. Think about confidence. A truly confident person doesn't think about confidence. They're not monitoring themselves, asking, am I being confident right now? Am I projecting confidence? That self-monitoring, that desperate grasping for confidence is itself the opposite of confidence. It's insecurity wearing a mask. Real confidence emerges when you're so absorbed in what you're doing that you forget to worry about how you're being perceived. It's a byproduct of presence, not a product of effort. Or consider trying to be spontaneous on command. Be spontaneous. Do something unexpected. The moment you're trying to be spontaneous, you're following an instruction, calculating what would count as spontaneous, performing spontaneity, which is, of course, the opposite of spontaneous. True spontaneity happens when you're not thinking about being spontaneous, when you're simply responding naturally to the moment. The pattern repeats across every domain where the backwards law applies. The trying itself creates the obstacle. In psychology, this is sometimes called the ironic process theory, or thought suppression. When you try not to think about something, you must keep that thing in mind to monitor whether you're thinking about it. Try not to think about a white bear. What are you thinking about? The white bear. When you try to force yourself to sleep, you're maintaining a wakeful awareness that monitors whether you're asleep yet. The monitoring prevents the sleep. When you desperately need to appear calm, you're in a state of high alert about your anxiety, which maintains the anxiety. The effort to achieve the state prevents the state from arising. Now, here's where people often misunderstand this teaching. They hear stop trying and think it means give up, or be passive, or don't care about anything. That's not what the backwards law suggests at all. There's a profound difference between giving up and letting go, between apathy and acceptance, between not caring and not clinging. When I was younger, I spent 2 years in a monastery in northern Thailand. Not because I wanted to become a monk, but because I wanted to understand what these men had discovered about the nature of mind. One of the teachings that puzzled me most at first was this idea of effortless effort. How can effort be effortless? It sounds like a contradiction. But watch a master craftsman at work. A potter at her wheel, a calligrapher with his brush, a jazz musician improvising. There's tremendous skill there, years of practice and discipline. But in the moment of creation, there's a quality of flow, of naturalness. They're not straining, they're not forcing, they're allowing their training to express itself through them. This is effortless effort. This is Wu Wei. Action that doesn't feel like action because it's aligned with the natural flow of things rather than fighting against it. Think of a river. A river doesn't try to flow, it simply flows. It follows the path of least resistance, moving around obstacles rather than trying to force through them. And yet, over time, the river shapes mountains, not through force, but through persistence and yielding. This is the wisdom the backwards law points us toward. Not the abandonment of goals or desires, but a different relationship with them. Not grasping, but opening. Not forcing, but allowing. When you want something desperately, you create a psychological state of lack. Your entire being is oriented around the absence of the thing you want. You're constantly measuring the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that gap becomes your identity. You become the person who doesn't have X. The person who isn't happy enough, isn't confident enough, isn't loved enough. And from that state of lack, that state of desperate need, you can never actually receive what you're seeking, because you're vibrating at the frequency of not having rather than having. But when you let go of the desperate need, something shifts. You're no longer defined by the absence. You're no longer clutching. And paradoxically, that's when the space opens for what you were seeking to arrive. Not because the universe rewards you for letting go, not because of some mystical law of attraction, but because letting go changes your psychological state, your behavior, your energy, and that change makes you receptive to what was always available but couldn't reach you through your clenched fists. You cannot receive with closed hands. So how do we actually live this? How do we apply the backwards law to our daily lives without falling into passivity or nihilism? First, we must learn to distinguish between two types of goals. There are achievement goals and state goals. Achievement goals are external, concrete, actionable. Write a book, learn to play guitar, start a business, build a garden. For these goals, direct effort works. You can make a plan, take steps, measure progress. The more you do, the closer you get. But state goals are internal, experiential, paradoxical. Be happy, feel confident, find peace, experience love. For these goals, direct effort backfires. You cannot force them into existence. You can only create conditions where they might arise. The wisdom is knowing which type of goal you're working with. If you want to write a book, sit down and write. Effort works. If you want to be happy, don't chase happiness. Instead, engage deeply with activities that absorb you. Cultivate relationships that nourish you. Contribute to things larger than yourself. Happiness may arise as a byproduct, but it cannot be the direct target. Second, practice what I call strategic surrender. This isn't giving up on what matters to you. It's releasing your white-knuckled grip on how and when it must happen. You can want something without needing it desperately. You can prefer an outcome without being destroyed if it doesn't arrive. You can work toward a goal while remaining open to alternative paths. This is the middle way, not attachment, not detachment, but non-attachment. You care, but you don't cling. I wanted to be a writer when I was young. I wanted it so badly that every rejection letter felt like a personal annihilation. Every piece I wrote was burdened with the weight of my desperate need for validation. And the writing suffered for it. You could feel the trying, the straining, the neediness in every sentence. Then I spent a year in a small village in Greece, helping to rebuild homes damaged by an earthquake. I wasn't writing. I wasn't thinking about being a writer. I was just mixing mortar and laying stones and sharing meals with people whose language I barely spoke. And something in me relaxed. The desperate grip loosened. When I started writing again, it was different. I wrote because I had things to say, not because I needed to prove I was a writer. And that's when people started paying attention. Not because the universe rewarded me for letting go, but because my writing had changed. It was no longer contaminated by desperation. Third, cultivate what the Buddhists call beginner's mind. Approach each moment fresh, without the burden of your accumulated desires and fears about how things should be. When you meet someone, don't meet them with the desperate need to be liked. Meet them with genuine curiosity about who they are. When you face a challenge, Don't approach it with anxiety about whether you'll succeed. Approach it with interest in what you might learn. When you wake up in the morning, don't immediately start measuring whether you're happy enough, productive enough, successful enough. Just wake up. Be present to the simple fact of being alive. This isn't about lowering your standards or abandoning your dreams. It's about removing the layer of desperate grasping that prevents you from actually experiencing your life. Because here's the deepest truth of the backwards law. Most of what we're desperately seeking, we already have. But we can't see it because we're too busy looking for it somewhere else, in some future moment when we'll finally have enough, be enough, achieve enough. Peace is available right now, but not to the person frantically searching for peace. Love is available right now, but not to the person desperately needing to be loved. Confidence is available right now, but not to the person anxiously monitoring their confidence level. The seeking itself is the obstacle. I want to close with something that took me many years to understand. The backwards law isn't really about achieving what you want through reverse psychology or clever techniques. It's pointing to something deeper about the nature of human experience. We spend so much of our lives in a state of argument with reality. This shouldn't be happening. I should be different. Things should be better. That person should love me. I should be further along by now. All that shoulding creates a constant state of tension, of resistance, of suffering. We're at war with what is, desperately trying to force reality into alignment with our preferences. And the backwards law whispers, what if you stopped fighting? Not because you don't care, but because the fight in itself is the problem. What if you could want things, work toward things, prefer certain outcomes, but without that layer of desperate resistance to what is? This is what acceptance really means. Not resignation, not defeat, but a deep okayness with this moment, exactly as it is, even while working to create the next moment. I learned this most profoundly when my wife died 7 years ago. Cancer. We had 6 months from diagnosis to death, and I spent the first 3 of those months in absolute resistance. This can't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. I need her to live. I need more time, and that resistance didn't change anything except to make me absent from the time we did have. I was so busy fighting reality that I wasn't actually present to her, to us, to the preciousness of each remaining moment. Then something shifted. I don't know exactly how or why, but I stopped fighting. I accepted that this was happening, and in that acceptance, I found a depth of presence, of love, of connection that I'd never known before. Not because the situation improved, but because I stopped being at war with it. The last 3 months of her life were the most painful and the most beautiful of mine. Because I was finally there, fully there, not trying to make it different, not clinging to what was slipping away, just present to what was. This is the ultimate teaching of the backwards law. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's a reality to be experienced. And the more we try to force it into our preferred shape, the more we miss the actual texture and richness of what's here. So yes, have your dreams, pursue your goals, work hard at things that matter, but hold it all lightly. Like sand in an open palm, the moment you clench your fist to hold it tighter, it slips through your fingers. Try to force yourself to sleep, and sleep eludes you. But lie down without agenda, simply resting, and sleep may come. Chase happiness desperately, and it runs. But engage fully with life, and happiness might arise as a natural byproduct. Grasp for love, and people feel the neediness and pull away. But offer your authentic self without attachment to outcome, and connection becomes possible. The backwards law isn't a technique, it's a recognition of how certain aspects of life actually work. An invitation to stop exhausting yourself with counterproductive effort. A permission to let the river flow. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying so hard. Stop forcing, stop grasping, and simply allow yourself to be present to what is. The boat knows how to float. You don't have to keep swimming. Sometimes you just need to stop fighting the current and let it carry you where you need to go. Not because you've given up on reaching the shore, but because you've realized that you're already in the water. And the water is life itself. Thank you for spending this time with me. May you find the wisdom to know when to row and when to float.